Bryce's voice came through the Zoom screen like a broken garbage disposal, metallic, smug, and chewing through lives without blinking. Effective immediately, 800 roles are being eliminated as part of our restructuring initiative. Just like that, 800, no soft language, no heads up, no human decency. Just a canned script from a man who probably wore all birds to his own wedding. Denise blinked. Once, twice, she didn't gasp. She didn't whisper, "Oh my God," like some of the others on the call. She just sat there, surrounded by her 3 dead succulents and a commemorative mug from the 2016 Security Summit, the one where she'd single-handedly patched a breach that could have wiped out their client archive. She dragged her eyes to the bottom of the email Bryce had forgotten to mention, but was now dropping in Slack like an obituary. Impacted employees have been notified via HR email. She checked her inbox. Subject, separation notification, TritonTech, no greeting, no thank you. Just severance terms colder than the server room AC she used to babysit during overnight rollouts. She was on the list. After 19 years, 5 reorganizations, 4 CEOs, and 1 excruciating Agile Thinking for Women in Tech seminar where the male speaker called her Debbie the entire time, she was on the list. And yet, not surprised, not really. Real kick in the gut came 3 seconds later. Her admin console, still inexplicably active, probably overlooked in HR's mass permission purge, flashed red. Alert, external payroll dump detected. Timestamp 1:14 a.m. User unknown privileged access tier 7. 12 hours before Bryce's Zoom guillotine. Someone had downloaded the entire payroll and performance database, annotated, version tracked, and encrypted. And not just the current year. This went back a decade. Names, salaries, ratings, termination justifications. Notes like low cultural ad and retirement assistant. This wasn't cleanup, this was premeditated. If you're listening and you've made it this far, hey, real quick, hit that subscribe button, would ya? 97% of folks just lurk here without following, but that tiny click seriously helps the team keep stories like this coming. Plus, it's free, cheaper than severance. Now, back to the mess. Denise minimized the Zoom window. People were still crying, swearing, asking if this was a joke. It wasn't. HR was already snaking through Slack channels like digital morticians, revoking access, scheduling exit interviews, and delivering their synthetic condolences one checkbox at a time. But Denise wasn't crying. She was logging in. Deeper. She tunneled through the audit trail. Whoever initiated the dump had masked their IP behind multiple relays. Amateur hour in Denise's book, but they'd used a credentialed login under Tier 7 access. That was C-level territory. Bryce, Lydia from HR, maybe Ian in finance, the guy who wore suspenders unironically and believed burnout was a mindset. As she followed the log, something started to itch in her brain. Last Thursday, she'd passed a locked conference room where Bryce and Lydia were huddled around a color-coded printout. She'd caught a glimpse of her name in red before they flipped the page over. At the time, she told herself it was paranoia. Now, it felt like prophecy. She opened her own performance file. 5 years of exceeding expectations, 2 patents, no formal warnings. Her review summary, too valuable to lose but not essential for optics. Optics, like she was wallpaper in a boys' club boardroom. She copied the unauthorized payroll dump onto an encrypted thumb drive she kept in her Altoids tin. She didn't know exactly what she was going to do yet, but she knew this much. She wasn't going to let them bury the truth under a pile of NDA-stamped severance PDFs. Not this time. Denise hadn't touched caffeine in 8 years, not since the kidney stone incident, but that morning she made a full French press, black as her mood and bitter enough to strip paint. If TritonTech thought they could kill her access, gut her team, and toss her into the job market like day-old shrimp cocktail, they had underestimated just how meticulous a woman can be after 19 years of quietly fixing everyone else's mess. She sat down at her battle-worn Lenovo ThinkPad corporate issue, but she'd upgraded the guts herself and went hunting. The logs were a maze of sanitized metadata and timestamp breadcrumbs, but Denise knew where to look. She'd written half the company's access control documentation back when the CTO still thought 2FA stood for too fancy admins. Whoever downloaded the payroll file used a temporary elevated token, routed through 3 proxy servers. Rookie mistake, the 3rd server was internal, not external facing. She knew exactly who had rights to it, Tier 7 access. That narrowed the suspect pool down to less than a dozen. All C-suite. All untouchable until now. One access ID stood out, LYD Delta Prime 7. Lydia, HR director with a God complex and a spreadsheet fetish. Denise cross-referenced the ID with system behavior over the past month. Lydia's account had spiked into unusual directories exactly 12 times, always around 1 to 3 a.m., always copying files like RIF Final Conf Perf Blend CSV and Severance Calc 2024 Q3 V7 Draft 2 Final. You don't name a file like that unless you're trying to bury something in plain sight. She glanced at her whiteboard. The corners still held a few post-its from a risk audit she'd led back in March, including one circled 3 times in red marker. Unmonitored access windows, 1 to 3 a.m. equals vulnerability vector. Well, she'd found her vector. That weird behavior from the week before started clicking into place like a cursed puzzle. She remembered walking past the fourth floor breakout room and seeing Bryce slam his laptop shut the second she walked by. Lydia had face-down printouts in pastel folders labeled strategic optimization candidates. Ian from finance was drinking kombucha again, which only happened when he was stress bloating. And then there was the printer. The office printer, usually quiet as a ghost in July, had been groaning like a wounded animal on Tuesday night. Denise had access to print logs. She checked. 32 pages printed at 2:47 a.m. on Lydia's credentials. Destination? Bryce's executive war room. War room. Hell of a name in hindsight. She opened her own personnel folder, locally saved version she'd mirrored last quarter, compared it to the one embedded in the layoff dump. Side by side, her jaw tightened. Her latest performance review was missing entire bullet points. Her security certification updates erased. In the dump copy, someone had added a red flag: low adaptability to new paradigms. Low adaptability? She was the one who taught half the IT staff to stop calling ChatGPT the AI robot lady. It got worse. Severance calculations. Her packet listed 3 months' pay and no health extension. But according to the severance spreadsheet Lydia printed, Denise's tier, based on tenure, performance, and department rating, should have qualified her for 6 months and Cobra for a year. That wasn't a clerical error. That was surgical. She backed up everything. Payroll dump, audit logs, review discrepancies. She ran checksum hashes, packaged the lot into a double encrypted archive, renamed the folder Cat Memes 2009. By the time the clock hit noon, HR had already scheduled her exit discussion for Monday. They didn't know it yet, but that was going to be one hell of a Monday. Denise didn't cry, she didn't beg. She took another sip of paint stripper coffee and said out loud to no one in particular, "They want to play God with people's futures? Fine. I'll be the devil in their firewall." It started with a column header. Buried inside the exported severance matrix, after all the HR-safe labels like department headcount delta and redundancy flag, was one innocuous little column titled Recalibrated Risk Factor, V2 Bryce Rev. Harmless on the surface. Corporate nonsense at its finest. But Denise had seen that naming structure before. Bryce had a habit of appending his initials to anything he touched, like a dog peeing on fire hydrants made of spreadsheets. She filtered the data. At first, the numbers didn't scream, they whispered. Patterns disguised as coincidence. Out of 800 terminated employees, 511 were women. Of those, 427 were over the age of 45. That's not a coincidence. She pivoted the data by age and gender, color-coded the cells. It looked like someone had dropped a red dye packet into the column marked F/45+. The recalibrated risk factor for that group averaged 0.81, low enough to flag redundant under the newly tweaked algorithm. Meanwhile, men under 40 with Ivy League diplomas, minimal experience, and performance scores lower than a Labrador on Adderall scored a solid 1.27, high strategic value. And wouldn't you know it, severance payouts scaled with that value. 6 months in stock options for Brad from Stanford, who once accidentally unplugged the backup server trying to charge his vape. 3 months and a pat on the back for Sandra, who'd managed the West Coast compliance team through 2 mergers and a ransomware attack. It wasn't just bias. It was sabotage in spreadsheet form. Denise's fingers hovered over her keyboard, tight and twitching. She felt that slow boil creep up her spine, the kind that starts somewhere behind the eyes and simmers until it scorches every polite impulse left in your bones. It wasn't just that she'd been screwed. It was that every woman like her, experienced, no BS legacy builders, had been surgically extracted like tumors from the company's future. She opened the spreadsheet's revision history. Password protected, but the encryption was laughable. Bryce's hint question was favorite sailing yacht. She cracked it in 20 minutes using a file name from his old Google Drive dump. Catalina Bachelor Trip 2019. JPG. The man recycled passwords like he recycled talking points. Inside the revision log, Bryce had personally overwritten the original algorithm parameters. The first version, likely created by their old CTO, had flagged employees for layoff based on underperformance, not demographics. That version resulted in far fewer women on the list. So Bryce added an override formula to weight tenure fatigue and culture elasticity. Translation: too old and not bro-y enough. Her rage didn't explode, it condensed. It became clean, purposeful, surgical. She pulled the files off her laptop and onto a private drive she kept for emergency documentation. Read, blackmail insurance. It was an old solid-state she'd gutted from a junked MacBook, now duct-taped inside a hollowed-out copy of the Phoenix Project, a nerd joke she hadn't thought would come in handy until today. She anonymized every file, stripped exif metadata, spoofed the timestamps, built mirrored directory trees with fake file names that would make any IT sniffers think they were digging through pirate episodes of NCIS, New Orleans. In a separate, hidden partition, she created what she would later call the coffin, a folder containing the raw, damning, uncut truth, payroll disparities, gender analytics, algorithm revisions, Slack screenshots, even an internal memo Lydia had sent that read verbatim, "If we massage the parameters just slightly, we can call it optimization and not discrimination." Massage. She hoped they like subpoenas with happy endings. She closed her laptop and stared out her window. Across the street, some intern at the co-working space was vaping in joggers and flipping through a crypto white paper. Denise had once been that intern, wide-eyed, caffeinated, believing that hard work would buy her a seat at the table. Turns out the table had a trapdoor, and she was now the one reaching for the lever. It was 6:42 p.m. on a Wednesday, and the office was supposed to be empty. Lights dimmed, keycards logged out, kind of silence that usually hung like mildew in a company post-layoff, when survivors walked softer, laughed quieter, and the coffee tasted like survivor's guilt. But Denise was still there, lurking in the shadows of her corner cube with a borrowed badge from the one junior dev who still thought she was cool for someone over 40. She had her ThinkPad open, one earbud in, and her screen recording software humming like a silent witness. That's when she heard it. Muffled voices, fast, low, coming from the sixth-floor glass fishbowl they'd started calling the war room. It wasn't booked, which meant it was being used unofficially. She unplugged and ghosted closer, steps featherlight on the industrial carpet. "If it leaks, we're done," Lydia hissed. "She won't leak it." She signed the exit NDA. "Bryce, we think she signed it," came Ian's nasal whine. "But what about the dump, the one from Monday?" There was a beat of silence. Nice felt the hairs on her neck stiffen. "You scrubbed the logs, right?" Bryce again, not nervous, angry. "I wiped what I could, but admin logs regenerate every cycle. If someone's watching," Denise smiled. She was watching. She'd already downloaded the access logs from the central admin repo, backed them up, and verified the hashes. They thought they were the only ones deleting things. Rookie mistake. She crept back to her cube and resumed recording. That week, strange things began to happen. Her sent folder started thinning out. Emails she remembered dispatching, mostly harmless ones like check-in notes to her old dev team, questions about budget line items, were vanishing. No archive, no trace. When she checked her email queue logs via console, the server listed them as delivered, but when she ran internal audits on message IDs, nada. Gone. Someone was scrubbing her trail, or trying to. She knew who had the authority to request silent deletions from IT: Lydia. The same Lydia who thought putting people architect in her email signature would hide the blood on her hands. It didn't stop there. Twice, her mouse moved when she wasn't touching it. Not in a haunted poltergeist way, but like someone had remoted into her machine and didn't realize she was still logged in locally. It lasted just a second or two each time. Long enough to notice. Long enough to confirm they were watching back. That's when Denise went full ghost protocol. She disabled screen sharing on her machine, replaced her camera drivers with dummy code, and installed a fail-safe script to detect and log remote access attempts. Then she set her screen recorder to activate on every boot, every sleep-wake, and every application launch. By Friday, she had 27 hours of surveillance footage of Lydia's Slack DMs to Ian. Still nothing from her side. But if she talks to anyone in PR, we burn the full release plan and start over. Footage of Bryce sending a midnight email to the board labeled contingency messaging whistleblower scenario. Footage of Ian downloading a CSV titled Risk Adjusted Retention Payouts Q3 Confidential, a file that listed hush money amounts offered to select impacted employees in exchange for silence. Niece's name wasn't on it. Of course it wasn't. She was a threat, not a liability. Her paranoia stopped being fear. It became fuel. She started logging not just what she saw, but how it changed. She noticed when icons vanished from her desktop, when file names autocorrected into corporate safe nonsense, when shared drives mysteriously synced new versions of files she knew she hadn't touched in days. They were trying to rewrite her story before she could publish it. Too late. By Sunday, she had mapped every shared folder they'd tried to sanitize, every timestamp that no longer matched its checksum, every email header that no longer belonged to a real message. Her desktop background, once a photo of her dog in a party hat, was now black, with one sentence dead center in white Arial bold: "Everything you delete, I duplicate." Denise found the file at 3:12 a.m., hiding in the kind of folder chain only a guilty conscience could design. Finance/internal/work in progress/do not use/archive/vfinal bypass dxlsx. That last part, bypass D, told her everything. The D wasn't a version number, it was her, Denise. Her initials, or worse, a nickname. Probably whispered in strategy calls like she was a thorn to be quietly plucked. She opened the spreadsheet with fingers so still it looked like time had stopped. It loaded slow, bloated with conditional formatting, bloated with secrets. First tab, projections. Second, current roster. Third, severance recommendations. Fourth, red flags, performance and risk. Fifth tab just said alt notes, and then her eyes hit the column labeled override justification. Names, rows of names, alongside each in the neat little cells of corporate execution. Notations so callous they read like eulogies for the living. DNR long-term liability. LT50F downgrade optics risk. Flagged, legacy bias, not a culture fit for new direction. Delay payout will likely not pursue legal if offered extended wellness coaching. Then she saw her own name, bolded. A red cell glared back at her. Bypass eligibility review 2 embedded visibility risk. No performance note. No disciplinary citation. Just one line in the margin, fast track separation, has system access. Remove privileges post-decision. That file wasn't just a plan, it was a kill list. Not a single metric in the spreadsheet came from the official HR system. Denise cross-referenced everything, termination flags, performance notes, even department reallocation fields, all overwritten, all manually. There was a version history. Office autosaves left breadcrumbs, like a guilty toddler trying to hide cookie crumbs. She found Bryce's user ID all over the metadata. Lydia too. Ian's fingerprints were lighter, mostly formula audits, final sign-offs, but he was in there. They had revised the entire framework of who got what, and why, not based on contribution, but on convenience. Tier 1 hires got Tier 1 packages. Everyone else got creative excuses and corporate condolences. Denise didn't feel hot with rage. She felt glacial, precision cut. She exported the file, ran a SHA 256 hash to verify its integrity, and created a copy with track changes enabled. Then she pulled the internal logs, access times, IPs, version history trails, anything that could later prove who had touched it and when. She crosswalked those timestamps with meeting invites and security badge logs she still had ghost access to, painting a timeline that wasn't just compelling, it was criminal. She compiled it all into a compressed archive. Encrypted it twice, once with a personal password, once with a rotating token based on system entropy she'd rigged herself years ago. She stored the file on a zero-knowledge cloud storage provider based in Iceland. She stored another copy on a thumb drive hidden in her car's air filter compartment. She titled the folder simply, Triton Severance Scheme Coffin. Let them delete what they wanted. Let them sanitize, gaslight, and quietly restructure their mistakes, because now she had the coffin and the nails to seal it. That night, Denise sat alone in her apartment, staring at her screen. She didn't blink. She didn't cry. She moved like a surgeon in a morgue, all careful angles and antiseptic silence. And before she shut her laptop, she opened one last file, a blank text document. She typed 3 lines, they think I'm gone, they think they've won. Let's see how loud quiet rage can get. The first message was short. Subject, TritonTech layoff algorithm sender. Throwaway watcher 004 at Proton Mailcom body. I have evidence the layoffs were discriminatory. Encrypted file attached. Key to follow if confirmed interest. DW she sent it to 6 tech reporters, 3 legacy outlets, 3 independent bloggers who knew how to follow a breadcrumb trail even when corporate PR tried paving over it with jargon and denial. Within 48 hours, one of the independents posted a vague tweet. Something deeply rotten brewing inside a top 200 cybersecurity firm. You know who you are, retweets climbed fast. Comments even faster. Denise didn't respond. She didn't need to. She just watched the spark catch. Next, she slipped a clue into a Reddit thread on the unofficial Triton Tech employee subreddit, r/trashed by Triton. An older post had asked, anyone else notice patterns in who got laid off? Most replies were jokes, some bitter sarcasm, a few sad goodbyes. Then Denise dropped this, check v final bypass DXLSX. If you know where to look, the numbers tell the truth. It took 3 minutes. User data diva 94 responded, wait, how do you know about that file? That wasn't public. Then came the dominoes. People started remembering things, emails that disappeared, meetings canceled last minute, a coworker who overheard Bryce call someone a legacy blockage, someone else whose manager suddenly went radio silent before the layoffs dropped. Then came the copycats. Anonymous users posting alleged snippets, file paths, internal memos. Half of it was speculation, half of it was real. Denise knew which parts she'd seeded and which parts they were uncovering on their own. That's when HR panicked. A Slack message appeared in every surviving employee's inbox, bolded and posted in Hash Compliance Central. Police car light reminder, unauthorized access or download of company files constitutes a violation of policy and may result in legal action, including prosecution. Police car light no smiley face. No per our guidelines. Just pure panic, neatly disguised as professionalism. Denise screenshot it. She knew the signs of a drowning org. HR had moved from silence to veiled threats. The next step was scapegoating. Someone would take the fall. She just had to make sure it wouldn't be her, and that it wouldn't happen before the detonator was ready. She went to work on her go-live package. On a private, isolated system she nicknamed the Vault. She began assembling the full dossier, the raw severance files with metadata trails, screenshots of Slack conversations between execs, HR directives tagged with internal risk group, her own altered performance reviews, side-by-side comparison, voice memos from the hallway war room conversations, enhanced and cleaned. Every file had a checksum log. Every log had a source. Every source had redundancy across multiple remote backups, including one she stored in the metadata of a photo album called Grandma's Potluck Recipes. Old trick, reliable as hell. She added a readme txt in plain English. No legalese, no threats, just the facts, the numbers, and the story stripped bare. This is what they did. This is who signed off. You decide what justice looks like. Then she built the delivery system, automated, staggered, deniable. If she got shut down, the files would still deploy. Encrypted torrent seeds, mirror links, anonymous forum drops, a per-written blog post on a time delay release platform, a few strategically timed emails to board members, investors, and one notoriously unforgiving labor watchdog. She named the package Operation Lazarus Sip, because they thought she was gone, because dead systems don't resurrect. But ghosts? Ghosts in the machine come back with receipts. Her hands trembled once, just once, as she tested the release triggers. Not from fear, from clarity. She wasn't just blowing the whistle. She was pulling the plug on a whole goddamn lie. And the hum in her ears wasn't anxiety. It was satisfaction sharpening itself like a blade. The email wasn't dramatic. Denise didn't need drama, she had evidence. It was short, stripped of flair, and delivered with the precision of a sniper shot. Subject: Urgent Compliance Inquiry Triton Tech Recipients. Compliance at SecGov. Select shareholders at TritonTech.com. Ethics Desk at RecodeNet. 2 encrypted Proton aliases for journalists who'd already replied with "I'm listening." Body: To whom it may concern, is TritonTech's board aware of potential gender-based severance discrimination linked to recent layoffs? A file labeled vFinal Bypass DXLSX contains manually altered payout tiers that correlate negatively with age and gender. This is not a theory. This is math. Documentation available upon request. Sources protected. DW. She hit schedule. Delivery 9:03 a.m. Monday, just after the market opened, just before the shareholder webcast, timed like a scalpel. Then she sat back and watched the rot bubble up from underneath. Inside Triton Tech, the panic spread like battery acid through a power grid. The Slack leaks had kicked the hornet's nest, but now Denise could see the swarm forming. An emergency C-suite huddle was scheduled under the laughably vague title culture reinforcement sink. Attendees: Bryce, Lydia, Ian, the general counsel, and 2 senior comms advisors from a PR firm whose only real job was damage control for rich men who'd stepped on a rake. Bryce canceled his public keynote at the Tech West Summit due to unforeseen travel issues. Lydia posted a video to the internal wellness channel about navigating workplace grief and then ghosted entirely. No new calendar updates, no Slack replies. Ian updated his LinkedIn to say he was open to new opportunities. It had begun. In the server logs, Denise saw IT start sniffing around. Not subtly. There was a forensic scan pushed across employee terminals, a clumsy script aimed at detecting large outbound data packets, active screen recorders, hidden volumes. Her terminal, clean as a nun's browser history. Her real machine, the one hidden under her desk and daisy-chained into the office guest network with MAC address spoofing, never even blipped on their radar. Old hacker habits die hard. One night, as she passed the break room, she caught Bryce whispering into his phone, "Doesn't matter who leaked it. If this hits the board, I'm not taking the fall alone." That told her everything. He wasn't strategizing. He was negotiating his own survival. Meanwhile, middle managers were cracking under pressure. One quietly forwarded her a confidential slide deck labeled Crisis Messaging Playbook. Slide 3 said, "Avoid direct acknowledgement of discrimination. Use phrases like deeply committed to equity and reassessing our metrics framework." Slide 7, if asked about the spreadsheet, deflect to legal review. Never confirm its existence. She added it to Operation Lazarus. Denise's emotional state, ice bath stillness. She wasn't scared anymore. She'd moved past fear into a territory most people never reach, the quiet plateau where purpose drowns out panic. She'd spent her life being the fixer, the cleaner, the one who spotted vulnerabilities and patched them before anyone even knew there was a leak. Now she was the leak. And the timing? Perfect. Monday morning would bring open inboxes, live cameras, boardroom buzzwords, and a well-placed little question. Is TritonTech's board aware of gender-based severance discrimination? By the time they finished gaslighting the first shareholder, the email would be making rounds in inboxes that couldn't be muted. And Denise would be sitting in her car in the employee lot, sipping tea, watching the company she once gave her spine to start hemorrhaging from the throat. The webcast began like they always did. Sterile smiles, practiced charm, and a background that screamed innovation but smelled like anxiety, sweat, and dry erase markers. Bryce sat center stage under a ring light, face powdered, shirt collar starched within an inch of its life. A woman from IR opened the floor with platitudes about transparency during times of transformation, which in Triton Tech speak meant we fired people and hope you still invest. The webcast chat lit up with softball questions, most pre-screened, some likely planted. Then came the break in rhythm. The moderator paused, frowned just slightly, and glanced at the teleprompter like it had betrayed her. Then she cleared her throat. "We have an anonymous question submitted via our shareholder portal." A small flicker of recognition crossed Bryce's face. like a man who just saw the shadow of a noose on the wall. Moderator continued. Is TritonTech's board aware that the recent layoffs disproportionately affected women over 45, and that severance packages appear to have been adjusted to favor younger, male employees from Tier 1 academic backgrounds? Bryce's practiced smile cracked like a windshield. He shifted in his chair, did a hard blink, and reached for his water bottle with the hand of a man suddenly aware that everyone in the room could smell smoke. Well, first, let me just say we take allegations of discrimination very seriously, he stammered, eyes darting toward the legal rep off-screen. I'm unfamiliar with any such patterns, but I'd be happy to consult with HR and legal for further clarification. And that's when she walked in. Denise, in black jeans, her old Triton Tech fleece, and boots that echoed just enough to turn heads. She didn't march. She glided. Straight through the auditorium's side door, past the panicked AV crew and up to the media table like she owned the building, which spiritually she did. She didn't say a word. Just slid a matte black USB drive onto the AV station next to the HDMI switcher. The AV tech looked up at her, stunned. She just nodded once. He hesitated, then plugged it in. The projector stuttered. The corporate slideshow flickered. Then it happened. On screen, a full-screen heat map of the layoffs, color-coded by age, gender, and department. Red zones clustered thick around the 45-plus female demographic. The accompanying legend read, Redundancy Algorithm Recalibration Bryce Rev Edition. Gasps. Actual, unfiltered gasps from shareholders, assistants, and even one board member whose jaw visibly dropped. Then came the side-by-side comparison of performance reviews, original vs. doctored, notes like exceeds expectations replaced with culturally stagnant, margins scribbled with lines like no optics value and legacy fade candidate. It got worse. Slack screenshots, audio waveform animations, and finally, a scrolling list of file names. vFinal bypass DXLSX severance tier overrides real final use this XLSX culture, pivot deck 2024 Q3. PPTX the last slide. A single quote from Bryce's own Slack log. Date stamped and attributed. If we don't trim the deadwood, we're dragging legacy ballast into a new culture. Let the lawyers sort it out if they squawk. Real-time reactions flooded the webcast chat. Shareholder reps typing in all caps. Someone posted, "Is this verified?" Followed by 3 fire emojis. Another wrote simply, "Class action incoming." The moderator stood frozen. Bryce tried to recover, mumbling something about unauthorized access and taking this offline. But it was too late. The stock ticker in the corner of the screen twitched, then dropped. 4 points, then 6. By the end of the webcast, down 12. Denise didn't wait for applause. She didn't need it. She turned and walked out the same way she came in, past a row of stunned interns, one of whom whispered, "Holy shit, that's her." She didn't even smirk. In the parking lot, she slid into her car, turned the key, and stared through the windshield. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. The kind of trembling you get after holding your breath underwater longer than your body was ever meant to. She felt empty, full, lighter, heavier, like she'd just leveled a building and could still smell the dust. And somewhere under it all, a quiet voice that sounded a lot like herself said, "You did it. Now burn the matches." 46 hours after the shareholder webcast imploded, TritonTech's official Twitter account posted a 7-line apology note typed in Apple Notes and screenshotted like a drunk teenager's breakup text. It read like legal tofu, bland, spongy, impossible to digest. "We are committed to fostering a workplace of integrity and accountability. In light of recent developments, we have engaged an external firm to conduct an independent review. No mention of spreadsheets. No mention of bias. Just a quiet burial wrapped in diversity buzzwords and passive voice." But the SEC didn't need poetic phrasing. By noon, they'd filed notice of inquiry. By sunset, 3 federal subpoenas were in motion. One went to Ian, who deleted his entire LinkedIn history and tried to board a flight to Vancouver before getting stopped by airport security for coincidental system errors. Another hit Lydia's inbox at 6 a.m., waking her mid-massage at a Sedona restorative retreat she'd booked with company funds. She went on leave within hours. And Bryce? Bryce issued a resignation statement so packed with phrases like "grateful for the journey" and pivoting toward personal growth that even the PR firm responsible probably gagged proofreading it. Meanwhile, Reddit caught fire. Threads multiplied. Employees started leaking copies of memos, side by side with Denise's releases. Someone even compiled a greatest hits PDF. The Triton Tech papers, complete with a table of contents and a flaming Phoenix clip art logo on the cover. Denise didn't say a word. She let the world draw its own conclusions. That was the beauty of facts. You didn't have to shout them to be heard. She never returned to tech. She declined 3 offers, 2 from high-paying ethics oversight roles, and 1 from a startup that wanted to gamify whistleblowing. That one made her laugh so hard she nearly cracked a molar. Instead, she joined a coalition of whistleblowers from across industries, nurses, coders, auditors, even a former Air Force contractor with a vendetta against drone policy. Together, they built a speaker circuit, a newsletter, and a back-channel support network for anyone ready to speak up. but unsure how to survive the firestorm afterward. Denise started speaking at panels, conferences, and college classrooms. Her story wasn't flashy. It didn't involve spyware or backdoors or fancy black hat exploits. Just spreadsheets, silence, and the kind of rage that knows how to wait. Her favorite line during Q&As, "I didn't blow a whistle. I pulled the fire alarm and walked out while the smoke was still rising." A year later, Bryce's name trended again, this time next to the words class action certified. Shareholders were suing. Displaced employees were joining. Former intern posted a TikTok of himself burning his TritonTech ID badge to dramatic music. The company rebranded quietly 2 quarters later. New name, same rot, and Denise? She sat in her tiny cabin on the edge of Ohio, fire crackling, dog asleep at her feet, and a hot mug of tea steaming in her palms. Her laptop buzzed with one last notification, a news alert tagging her as the catalyst behind the SEC probe. No name, just initials. Just enough, she clicked it closed, stared at the screen for a beat, then hovered over the icon in the upper corner. Log out. Click, screen dark. A woman who was never supposed to matter just made history by refusing to shut up. And somewhere, in a dusty Triton Tech conference room no longer in use, a ghost in the machine finally vanished. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.